Hi, this is Miss King, and I'm going to take you through the Unit 4 drama notes. This is a great way to make sure that your notes are complete by the end of the unit in case you miss any pages or miss a day of class for any reason. Here's our table of contents. I'm going to be going in order, but this screencast will also be broken up according to pages, so feel free to skip through to the pages that you need to complete. We're going to start off with Shakespeare's life and time period. This can be found on pages 2 through 4 in your notes packet. If for any reason I'm going too fast, feel free to skip and pause the video at any point to copy down what you need. William Shakespeare, born on April 23rd, 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, England. He married Anne Hathaway, a woman 8 years older and who was pregnant with his child at the time, in 1582. In 1587 through 1592, this is when William Shakespeare establishes himself as a London actor and playwright. Today, he's most famous for his plays and poetry, such as his sonnets. In 1594, Shakespeare's acting company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, is formed. This acting group is later renamed the King's Men in 1603 after King James I becomes their patron. A patron just means somebody who supports and kind of pays for the acting company. In 1594 through 1608, this is when Shakespeare focuses mainly on writing plays. In 1599, the Globe Theatre is built. William Shakespeare dies on April 23rd, 1616. So according to most scholars, he actually dies on his birthday. Next section, Elizabethan time period. Shakespeare lived and wrote most of his plays during the rule of Queen Elizabeth I of England, from 1558 to 1603. Because Queen Elizabeth was a very influential ruler, her name is used to describe the time period. Elizabethan era. This is a term used to describe the time period in which Queen Elizabeth ruled. Elizabethan England. This term is used to describe England during Queen Elizabeth's rule. Elizabethan theater. This term is used to describe theater during Queen Elizabeth's rule. Next section, characteristics, death, and disease. The bubonic plague was one of the most devastating diseases of the Elizabethan era. It is a highly contagious disease spread by fleas and rodents. Nowadays, if untreated, approximately 50 to 60% of people would die from the disease. At the time, Elizabethan medicine wasn't advanced, so there wasn't effective treatment or prevention. Many believed the disease was God's way of punishing society for its sins. Here is a little map from 1970 to 2016. This is the United States. As you can see, there are still cases of the plague to this day. However, plague can pretty much be cured and treated through an antibiotic called penicillin. So it's not as much of an epidemic, obviously, as it was during the Elizabethan era. Moving on to religious turmoil. There were two main religions in Elizabethan England. We had Catholicism and Protestantism, both of which are forms of Christianity. They're just different branches. Mary, who was the queen before Elizabeth, and her half-sister, they shared a father, was a Catholic and ordered that all Protestants be put to death. However, Queen Elizabeth herself was a Protestant. England was extremely divided on this issue. Neither side wanted to give up their faith. Queen Elizabeth I helped to calm some of the religious tension after she took the throne. In Romeo and Juliet, be on the lookout for two sides that go against one another, similar to the two dueling religions in English society. Marital customs. Traditionally, fathers arranged for their daughters to be married at a young age. Marriages were generally intended to be mutually beneficial to both families and were often made strategically. With parental permission, girls could be married starting at the age of 12. Unmarried women were often looked down upon. It was not common for a couple to marry purely for love. Many couples didn't even know each other that well before getting married. We'll see some of these marital customs be reflected and broken in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. So make sure to be on the lookout for that. Elizabethan theater. Only men acted. Typically, boys or effeminate men played female roles. Plays were interactive. Audiences would have yelled and cheered throughout the play. All social classes, rich, poor, and even royalty, attended the theater to see the same play. Elizabethan theaters were round, meaning that there were seats on all sides of the stage. The price of your ticket depended on where you sat. Royalty and very upper class individuals would have seats in very visible areas so everyone could see them. It was kind of the place to see and be seen. The cheapest tickets allowed you to stand on the ground at eye level with the stage. People who bought these tickets are called groundlings. Groundlings were packed in tightly, practically standing on top of each other. They didn't have access to the bathroom, which also meant that they might be urinating right where they stood or sat. Shakespeare had a diverse audience. To appeal to the poor and less educated, he included goofy characters, usually servants, who made dirty jokes and act stupidly. These characters usually talk very plainly and informally. However, to appeal to the rich and educated, he also included very powerful characters that used sophisticated language. Shakespeare's language. This is on pages 5 through 7. Shakespeare was very different than any writer before or after him. His style of writing had an enormous and lasting impact on the English language. One reason his style of writing may seem unfamiliar to us is because writing and conventions of languages change over time. Shakespeare wrote to suit his purpose, and he manipulated language to fit a particular rhythm in his writing. When the existing language couldn't cut it, Shakespeare got created. The Oxford English Dictionary credits Shakespeare with introducing nearly 3,000 words into the language. He also used obsolete words, meaning he kind of brought back words that weren't really used anymore. Generally, there were 3 areas where readers tend to struggle with Shakespeare's writing. 1, vocabulary, 2, syntax, and 3, wordplay. Vocabulary. Shakespeare often uses contractions and left out words. This was done to achieve a certain number of syllables in a line of writing or for rhyming purposes. Common Shakespearean contractions. Take a look. Feel free to reference this chart as we read his sonnets and Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare also uses a special set of pronouns. Thou is you as a subject, thee is you as an object, thy or thine is your, and ye equals you, plural. Go ahead, and this is a practice section, so rewrite the sentences. So if it looks like it's in English we might use, you are going to translate it into Shakespearean English. If it's looking a little Shakespearean, you are going to go ahead and translate that into a more modern sentence. There are 5 sentences here. Feel free to pause the video, complete the practice, and come back when you're finished. Here is the answer to the practice section. Go ahead and make sure that your paper matches the screen. Feel free to pause if you need to. Next section is syntax. Shakespeare also used unusual syntax or sentence structure to emphasize certain parts of his writing. Using unusual syntax was fashionable and creative and appealed to his audience. Take the simple sentence, I ate the sandwich. Shakespeare might rearrange the order of words to emphasize different parts of the sentence. Take a look here at the different ways that you can mess with the syntax here and what is stressed and not stressed. Next up is wordplay or rhetorical devices. This section can be found on pages 8 through 9 in your packet. Wordplay or rhetorical devices. Shakespeare was extremely skilled at playing with his words. He did this by using rhetorical devices, which we can think of as language tools. You're already familiar with some of the rhetorical devices that he commonly used. Alliteration. This is repetition of the same beginning consonant sound throughout a line or verse. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought. This is from Sonnet 30, but you can see and hear that S sound being repeated throughout the line. Now old Desire doth in his deathbed lie. This is from Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, the prologue. Here you can see the letter D, or the sound D, being repeated in this line. Here's some alliteration practice. I want you to go ahead and pause the video, identify what sound or letter is being repeated throughout. Anaphora. This is the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses. Mad world, mad kings, mad composition. This is from King John. We see mad being repeated, which is a word at the beginning of each of these clauses. Here's some practice with anaphora. Go ahead and see if you can identify what's being repeated here in Richard II, Act 2, Scene 1. Assonance. Repetition or similarity of the same vowel sound in non-rhyming words close to each other. The man with the cat chats with me. Here we have that same A vowel sound. Just a reminder, our vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. The early bird catches the worm. As you can see, we have, once again, same vowel sound in words that do not rhyme. Early, bird, and worm do not rhyme, but they do have a same vowel sound throughout. Here's some practice with assonance. Go ahead and see if you can identify the assonance in this section from a poem. Consonants. This is similar to assonance, but is repetition or similarity of the same consonant sound in words that are all close to each other. So your consonants are going to be anything that is not a vowel, so any letter that is not A, E, I, O, U, or sometimes Y. Our example here is all's well that ends well. As you can see and hear, we have the repetition of that L, the double L sound. Here is a sentence for you. See if you can identify the consonants in this section. Next up, we have puns. Wordplay that uses the potential multiple meanings of a word or similar sounding words for a humorous or impactful effect. This was especially effective in plays because the audience is listening rather than reading. Go ahead and see if you can figure out the pun here in the graphic. Here are some more examples of puns. So the hat here is saying, you hang around, I'll go on ahead. So this is a tie which hangs from your neck and a hat which goes on your head. I don't trust stairs because they're always up to something. You can travel upstairs and they generally lead to something. Next up, we have rhyme scheme. So the pattern of rhymes at the end of each line of a poem, song, or passage. Letters are used to denote the rhyme scheme. So we have twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. This would be an A, B, B rhyme scheme. Star, A, rhymes with R, A. So you just are assigning the first letter of the alphabet to the first rhyme in the poem. Then we have high and sky. They both rhyme as well. But since we've already used A and high does not rhyme with star or R, you're going to assign the letter B. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and identify the rhyme scheme in this poem by Robert Frost. Take a look at the end of each sentence or stand here and see what rhymes with one another and what letters you would associate. Next, we're going to move on to basic play structure and features. This can be found on pages 10 through 11 on your packet. Acts and scenes. So plays are a little bit different from a novel because plays are divided into acts. Acts are then divided into smaller scenes. Acts often roughly correspond with plot structure. Scenes are subdivisions of acts and typically begin and end with characters entering and leaving the stage. Most plays will have 5 acts, and each act may have multiple scenes. Romeo and Juliet has 5 acts, and each of those acts has between 1 to 6 scenes. Stage directions. These are instructions written into the script to express how the playwright intended to communicate action, movement, or production requirements. These are not read when the plays are performed and are typically indicated with italicized writing in modern day publication of plays. So if you see something like Juliet enters, you're not going to read that out loud. That is direction for the actors and actresses so they would know that in this scene, Juliet is coming out onto the stage. Here's an example. Samson and Gregory, servants of the Capulet family, enter carrying swords and small shields. So this would not be read, but this is to let the people either creating or acting the play out know what should be happening during that scene. We need the characters of Samson and Gregory. We need them to enter the stage carrying swords and small shields. Gregory, I swear, we can't let them humiliate us. We won't take their garbage. Teasing Samson. No, because then we'd be garbage men. So here we have some dialogue. Samson and Gregory are having a conversation. This section here in parentheses, teasing Samson, lets us know how the actor should be reading that line. They should be reading it with a teasing tone or attitude. Some more examples here. You lie. Pull out your swords if you're men. Gregory, remember how to slash. They fight. So the actors on stage would not be reading, they fight. Instead, they would just be performing that action. They would be fighting. Dialogue. This refers to the conversation between 2 or more characters. In a play, the script always indicates which character is talking. Here's some examples. These bolded names are just so you can know who is talking and saying the lines. Even though these don't have quotation marks around them, which you might see in a novel such as To Kill a Mockingbird, the name here and the fact that this is kind of just written in regular type lets us know that this is an example of dialogue. Asides. A dramatic device in which a character speaks briefly to the audience. The audience recognizes that the comment is unheard by other characters, even when they're on stage together. We understand asides to be expressions of a character's honest thoughts and opinions. So this is a moment when a character is speaking directly to the audience. Nobody else on the stage is supposed to be able to hear it. It's information, however, that the audience needs to know. Sometimes asides will also be used by a character to address specific characters in a group. When this occurs, the audience should understand that the aside was heard only by the speaker and the specific character addressed. So this might mean that it's 2 characters talking to one another, but no one else on stage can hear. It's a private conversation for them. Dramatic speeches. These are long, uninterrupted speeches by characters. They are often used by playwrights to develop important plot and character details and reveal information to the audience. Monologue. An extended dramatic speech given by one character. It is heard by and directed to other characters on the stage. Because monologues are directed at other characters, we can't always trust the speaker to be entirely truthful. This is a very dramatic kind of almost lecture that one character is giving to another. It might be full of emotion, full of information. However, we need to look at it under a microscope because we have to decide, can we believe this character or not? Then we have soliloquy. An extended dramatic speech made by a single character that expresses his private thoughts, desires, or internal conflict. The character is talking to himself. Often the character is the only person on stage. Soliloquies allow the audience to understand what the character is thinking and feeling. So this is the character having a conversation with themselves. They might be trying to work through something, expressing their true feelings, and it is their private thoughts, and no one else is listening. Because a soliloquy is made by a character to himself, we can trust soliloquies to be truthful. We can pretty much expect that the character is being honest with themselves. Quick tip, if you're trying to remember the difference between monologue and soliloquy are always solo, always alone. Elements of tragedy. This can be found on pages 12 through 13 in your packet. The elements of tragedy. 1. The main character is a tragic hero. 2. It follows the tragic plot structure. 3. At the end of the play, the audience experiences catharsis. Tragic hero. The main character is a tragedy. Has the following traits: noble born and or a great leader, someone the audience admires or likes, has a tragic flaw, and suffers a reversal of fortune. Noble born and or a great leader. The tragic hero is born into a rich and or powerful family. Often he is a leader, leading an army or a country. Someone that the audience admires or likes. The tragic hero is someone the audience looks up to or finds likable. The tragic hero is nearly perfect and the audience can identify with him. Tragic flaw. The hero has one flaw, his weakness, known as his tragic flaw. The flaw has something to do with the tragic hero's personality or character, such as excessive pride. It's not something superficial like, oh, his nose is too big. The tragic flaw leads to the hero's tragic end. This is his weakness that is ultimately going to lead to tragedy at the end of their story. Suffers a reversal of fortune. The tragic flaw brings the hero down from his elevated state from the beginning of the play. Everything changes from being great for the tragic hero to being awful, and tragically so. Since the tragic hero is the protagonist of the plays, his reversal of fortune is also the play's climax. That means the turning point of the play. Catharsis refers to the process of releasing or relieving emotional tension. Often it will be a release of sadness and pity for the characters in the tragedy. You end up feeling bad for these characters. The more the audience can relate to the play, the more cathartic the play will be. So the more you can kind of see yourself in the play, the more sympathy and sadness you'll end up having for those main characters when they ultimately experience their tragedy. Structure of tragedy. In all of his tragedies, Shakespeare used a specific structure that was proven to be successful in capturing an audience's attention. This is the structure of tragedy. We have exposition, exciting force, rising action, climax, falling action, moment of final suspense, catastrophe, and resolution. You might recognize some of these as basic plot structure. Shakespeare then used some other structures here to create a structure of tragedy. Exposition. The exposition describes the mood and conditions at the beginning of the play. The setting will be identified as well as the main characters and their positions, circumstances, and relationships to one another. This is kind of setting the scene, showing us where we are, and introducing us to the characters. Then we have our exciting force. This is also called the complication or initial incident. The exciting force is what gets things going. The exciting force begins the conflict with which will continue throughout the play. Next, we have rising action, the series of events leading to the climax. The plot becomes increasingly intense and will generally consist of more than one act of the play. Climax. The climax is the turning point of the play. From this point on, the Shakespearean hero moves to his inevitable and often grisly end. Falling action. The falling action includes the events occurring after the climax and up to the hero's tragic end. Moment of final suspense. Near the end of the play, there will be a moment when it will look as if things will work out for the tragic hero after all. This helps to make the ending even more tragic because it gets the audience's hopes up at the end, even if we already know it's going to end badly. Catastrophe. The complete downfall of the tragic hero, most often through death, but sometimes through some other devastating experience. Resolution. The end of the play. Any remaining conflicts are resolved here. This is a little plot diagram of what it's going to look like. The teal colors are plot elements you probably already know from the basic plot structure. Think back to the Pixar shorts we watched. Anything in purple are specific to tragedy. Next, we have character foils. This can be found on page 14. Character foils are used to help develop main characters by creating comparisons and contrasts. Character foils have traits that are opposite or contrasting to those of a main character. Help highlight the traits of the main character, and character foils are typically minor characters. Stereotypical character foils. So we have nerds and jocks. So nerds and jocks or sporty people are usually considered opposite of one another, but they help to define one another. We have a courageous hero who is foiled by a cowardly sidekick who shows us how truly brave the hero is. Angels and demons and tomboy versus girly girl. Some examples here, we have Juliet and Rosaline. They are foils of one another. Juliet is impulsive and wants the freedom to do what she wants. Rosaline wants a life of commitment to rules. Juliet loves Romeo, and Rosaline doesn't love Romeo. As you can see, they share a lot of traits that are opposite, and they kind of highlight one another. We're going to go through some examples together of the nurse and Lady Capulet. If you had trouble with the nurse and Lady Capulet here, feel free to check in with a classmate or ask Miss King for some help if you did miss this day. Those are all of our notes for Unit 4. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to a classmate, re-listen to the screencast, or ask Miss King for any questions, comments, or concerns. Thank you for listening.